This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm Drew Dixon. I am the chief content nerd at Love Thy Nerd and co-host of this here thing that you're listening to in your earballs. And
What? What?
And I'm joined with Chris Gwaltney, whose voice you're about to hear in your earballs as well.
Very offended.
Is that offensive?
What? Oh, I don't know. Maybe not.
It's better to call him.
I'm easily offended. Maybe. I'm Chris. I'm the chief executive nerd for Love Thy Nerd, and I get to be on this podcast and listen to Drew say offensive things about your ears.
I don't think it was offensive, but
well, that's your opinion.
So we're joined by Manny Tremblay. Did I say your last name right?
Just Tremblay is fine.
He added a little flourish on there.
I did.
Tremblay. You added a little French Canadian.
I don't think I've ever referred to you that way. I've always said Tremblay, but for some reason it came out that way.
Yes.
Tremblay.
What is? Do you know like the origin of your last name?
I was told by my dad that the last name is French or like French. He always called it French Canadian. And I don't know if that actually came with knowledge or if that was. I know in Canada, Tremblay. I've been told it's common like Anderson or Johnson. Like it's apparently a name that's rampant in Canada. I
don't think I've ever heard that name.
Yep.
So well, good to know. And you co-designed Dice Throne, which is
I did
a small little board game that a handful of people have heard about. No, It's like this really, really cool success story. Like it's, I think one of the coolest, neatest, most successful like board game Kickstarter success stories that I know of anyway.
Cool. Yeah. It's been amazing actually.
Yeah. But that's not your background.
Something that's really unique, at least from what I've experienced with Dice Throne, is like there is a rabid community around Dice Throne, like as a game. I think people, there's people that are like, oh yeah, cool, I like that game. But Dice Throne's like, man, you've got a diehard cult following of people that it's like a family,
It really is. It's funny you say that. This morning we just hit 4,000 members on our community page.
Right.
And I just posted literally 10 minutes before I got online with you guys about just thanking people for making it a community and having it be more than just a page, just a Facebook group. It is. I feel like it's a community, and honestly, we owe a lot of our success to that community.
Yeah.
I would love to say that the game is the reason, but honestly, when the community gets behind something, when it grows naturally on a solid foundation of people caring and wanting to be together, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
But people also aren't going to get around a crappy game, so give yourself some credit.
Yes,
especially tabletop people, board game tabletop fans, because they can be kind of like
entitled. That's the word you're looking for.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, I think all gamers, all nerds,
totally
have that.
Yes.
Well, it's the saturation, right? Like there's so many options. I mean, video games certainly more so, but board games with how much it's growing, like there's so many options. So like, I think again, that's a testament to how cool of a game Dice Throne is for people, is that they've got a lot of options out there and they're choosing you.
We've been told that games typically come out, they have their moment, and then they die off. Totally. And our game in the last 4 months, we have increased in sales every month from season one. So season one is over a year old now, and we're now increasing in sales 10 months later.
It seems like I've noticed too, like a lot of people who are into Dice Throne are not necessarily people who were big time gamers when they got into it.
Yep. Is
that, have you know, I'm sure you have a far better perception of that. Is that the case?
Yes. I think the game, and honestly, when Nate created the core idea of the game, what he wanted was a game that was easy to learn, simple to enter, but complex enough that you would play it and keep playing it and learn and dive into it. And I think that really caters to we you lovingly call them the kitchen table gamer. They're the people who they're not going to go to game clubs. They're not going to friendly local game stores.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They just buy it and play it with their friends on Friday night, Saturday night, with their kids. And I've played a lot of games where I like to pretend that my wife will want to play them. And that I lie to myself and I'm like, oh, I'll get this game because my wife will love it.
Been there, my friend.
Yeah. And then sure enough, she'll play it once, but that's it. Whereas Dice Throne, legitimately, families play it. Spouses play it. Kids play it. I mean, and now, gamers are starting to realize that there's more to it than just a dice chucker. And I think that's sometimes what the more elite gamer they will relegate it to, oh, it's a cute dice chucker. It's a warm-up game for my real big boy games.
Yeah.
I discovered that the hard way by getting wrecked a couple times recently.
I kind of, what you're explaining, like, to me, this is like the Rocket League effect. Drew, I know you know Rocket League. Do you know Rocket League, Manny? It's a video game.
I do not.
So it's huge. Like, it came out, oh man, it's probably like 3 years. I don't even know.
I guess at least
like
three
or 4
years
or so ago.
Yeah.
And it's soccer with cars. So you're driving a car around.
Rocket powered cars.
Yeah, like these, you've got nitro boost and, it's just ridiculous. Like you can jump and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it just exploded. Like it was a free game on PlayStation Plus. And it's just gone like gangbusters, man. They've got esports for it now. I mean, it's just, it's nuts. And it has that same quality to it that I think you're talking about with Dice Throne, in that the skill floor is really low. Like anybody can jump on there and drive a car around and hit a ball into a goal, and feel like they're being successful doing it.
Yeah. And if you know the basics of soccer, like you get it, how it works.
Yeah, like hit this ball into that goal that's on your side. Like it's cool. But you watch the pro players play this thing and you're like, okay, that is next freaking level, because it is, they're flying around in the air, like doing all kinds of these crazy stuff. So it makes me think of Dice Throne in that way too, of like, anybody can jump in there and just start throwing dice and, don't use the deck of cards, like just use dice and the board or whatever. But then you can also go, as Drew and I learned being at Dice Throne Con in the tournament, there's people that can, take you to task in that game.
I was going to say that I think it's part of the reason why I've played, I don't know, I've probably played 4,000 or 5,000 games of Dice Throne. And I would play right now. I would, like, if we were sitting in the same room and you were like, you just want to hang out and play Dice Throne today, I'd be like, heck yeah, I'm going to play Dice Throne all day. Like, and I would enjoy wild. I like, honestly, even saying it out loud makes me wish there was someone in my studio that I could just play with.
It's funny. He's getting goosebumps right now about his own game.
Literally. And it's funny because people will say, what's your favorite game? And I'm like, it feels narcissistic to say, but literally Dice Throne is my favorite game. It's everything I want in a board.
Yeah, you're in your sweet spot, man.
That's cool.
So we're kind of assuming, because a lot of our community is like bananas about Dice Throne, but maybe you should give like the quick pitch about like what is Dice Throne.
Sure. So Dice Throne, I mean, when I'm at shows, I like to lovingly call it combat Yahtzee, right? With a whole lot more strategy to it. And it's a game where you have a hero, I have a hero, we're going to battle. I have my dice, my board, my abilities, and all the heroes are very asymmetrical. So it's not like I'm playing red player and you're playing blue player. Like you have a completely different set of hero choices than I do and options. But we're dueling down. I got 50 health, you got 50 health, and we're going to use our cards and our dice. We're going to hit abilities, and we're going to try to reduce the other player to 0. So it's, again, at its core, it's a very simple dueling game. I remember a kid at PAX South walked up. He heard the pitch, and he's like, "Oh, it's like Overwatch." And I was like,
sure, buddy. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, there's a hero.
Whatever makes you buy it. Yeah. Whatever makes you buy it.
There's a hero and you battle other people. And so, I guess.
Yeah. I think I can actually totally see that, because in Overwatch you have an ultimate that you have to charge up, and like playing that ultimate correctly is really important. And then you have, all these heroes that have kind of different abilities and things. So yeah, there's definitely some overlap there. I learned the skill ceiling the hard way. We we went to Dice Throne Con. We got to hang out with you in person a few weeks ago, and it was a blast. And I actually hadn't played a ton. I'd probably played like 3 or 4 games in my life leading up to that. And I played in the tournament, won my first 2 games, and I was like, you know what? I'm pretty good.
He was Manny. Let me tell you, he was unbearable. I can't even tell you.
They keep saying that.
He was so smug after those first 2 games.
There was this is what happened. There was a lot of like trash talking about how I was going to get wrecked in the tournament, and it didn't happen. The first guy that I played said that he was like runner up in last year's tournament. So I was like, the fact that I beat him, I was like, man, like I'm pretty good at this game. Wow, and then my second game was against like a 7-year-old. So I can't really brag too much about that one.
But you did.
I did a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he there were like 3 different times when his dice landed on the edge of his mat to where it wasn't completely flat, on the table, And he was like, "Oh, it's not flat. I get to re-roll that one." And it was like you knew what the dice was. I was like, it's clearly a 4, and he's like re-rolling it because he wants a 6.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you for a second because are you a dice person? Are you a dice player?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, like,
okay,
no, I don't
not.
play.
You
like
didn't answer properly, so I know you're not.
Yeah. Is that fair? Am I in the wrong here?
So I will explain to you. Dice people are a unique breed of gamer.
Okay.
They will. So often, what happens, and this kid is learning this, obviously, probably from his dad or whatever. But when you're a dice person, if you roll the die and it is not perfectly flat, they will almost always re-roll it. Or what they will do is they'll grab another die and they'll set it on top of the first one. And if it slides off, that means the die is cocked and must be re-rolled. But if it can sit on top balanced without moving, then the die is considered flat and therefore is not re-rolled.
Yeah. I just saw that technique for the first time. I don't think it was at Dice Throne Con, but I just saw it like a couple weeks ago. Somebody do that. I'm like, what are you doing? And they explained that whole theory to me, and I'm like, I accept.
I did not know that. Well,
so yes, dice people are intense.
I didn't like,
especially if they're 7.
Yes. I didn't like say anything.
No,
but because he was younger and stuff, and I was just like, okay, whatever. But inside, I was going like, that's not fair. Like, but I won. So, then the next 2 games, I got wrecked, and I could tell it was. The reason I did kind of enjoy those games, even though I lost, was because I was like, oh, I get what I knew why I lost at the end. And I saw some strategies I had no idea about, and was like, it made me itching to get back to the table to play it again, which I think is probably evidence of some solid game design. So, it was a good time.
Cool.
I think it's also worth saying that, and I'm probably wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's just what we do. I don't know of another board game that like has its own convention. Like I think that speaks to that community, that like these guys, and not an exaggeration, we were there. Like people just played Dice Throne, like that was it. They played Dice Throne and they loved it, and they like. It was all about that community. And I think that just speaks again to this unique, I think, place that you guys have found in the industry.
Yeah. I think it's a special thing. And I think it's important for, I know it's important for Nate and I when we think about it to be very grateful for the fact that this is happening, but not to, I feel like not to take all the credit for it, because it's one of those things where, you can set out to make something that grows community and that has grassroots and strength like this. You can want to make it, but that doesn't mean it will happen. I mean, I think every game is trying to build things like this, and it just doesn't happen all the time. So I think it's definitely a special place and time for us.
Yeah. So we should probably give people a little bit of like bearings on what you guys have done since season 1. So you mentioned earlier, season 1 continues to sell well. I picked up a copy at Dice Throne Con, so you got another sale off me. Yeah. So there you go. And then you guys released season 2 not too long ago, and have announced season 3 now, which we got to do like a little sneak peek preview play it at Dice Throne Con. So
yeah. So when we set out to do this, I mean, Nate and I were very much inspired by fighting games, games like Diablo. We're both big action RPG fans. We love Soul Calibur, and we both come from video games. And then I love tabletop war games, War Machine in particular. And so when we set out, we wanted to create an ongoing roster, like League of Legends, like Dota, where we're going to create new heroes, we're going to expand the roster and create a system, an ecosystem people can play in. And so when we first set out, even our distributor was like, yeah, that's probably not going to work because board games is all about Cult of the New. And we're like, well, we're going to try it anyways. So
yeah, forget you. What do you know?
Yeah, that's basically, we're like, well, this is what we want to do. So we're going to try it and see if it works. Yeah. And lo and behold, it has worked so far.
So and before that, you guys were making video games, right? You and Nate.
Nate and I were making video games before Dice Throne ever started. And then we both got laid off from the same company at the same time in August of 2016. So when we got laid off, we had been working on a video game version of Dice Throne at the time. Except it was called Dice Forge, and it wasn't the same game. It used Yahtzee style mechanic for other things.
That's cool. That's cool. So
season 1, and then now there's season 2. It's coming out in two hero packs, right? So in January, the first 2, box 1 and 2, came out. Box 3 comes out next week, I think. I think it's next week into retail. Yeah. And then box 4 comes out in May for season 2, sorry.
Yeah.
And then, season 3 is in the works, and we're planning a Kickstarter campaign. We don't have a date picked for it yet, but as soon as we feel like we're ready to launch that, we will. And as you mentioned, you got to play it, but it's a co-op. You can play any of the heroes that currently exist and future heroes in the co-op campaign.
Yeah, I love that. So it's this, and there will be a few new heroes in season 3, right?
There will be at least a couple, yes. We're not actually sure what the total count is. Might be 2, might be 4. We don't know for sure.
Cool.
So this, don't let it go to your head. Okay. But that's a stroke of brilliance, I think, in what you got, this corner that you're turning with season 3. Because I don't know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of any other board game, tabletop game that changed trajectories like that, but not even in you can still, after season 3, you can still play Dice Throne PvP, 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or whatever.
Yep.
But also now you've completely changed genres in a way of now it's also a co-op and you can do both. That, that to me is a stroke of brilliance. And for someone like me that, I'm super excited for season 3 because most of the time when I'm playing games with people, it's 3, 4 or 5 people.
Yep.
And, Dice Throne in its current state, it's it's best 1-on-1 in my experience.
Yep.
And so with this co-op thing, that opens it up, I think, to a whole new market of people.
Right.
I
know
and that's just, you guys nailed it.
Yeah. And honestly, this is all Nate. Season 3 is his baby. He is a huge co-op fan. He loves it. He loves the format. He, even from the beginning, he was like, I want a co-op at some point. And we're like, well, we want to build a proper roster first, because what you're talking about, the idea of we built one game and then all of a sudden we introduce a completely different game that allows you to use everything you had previously. It's super cool. And what it does is, there's a lot of people out there that don't like fighting each other. That's just a part of board games, right? They don't want to battle. They want to play together, or they want to passive aggressively play against each other, a la Euro games, where they're like,
right, yeah,
I'm not fighting you, I'm just trying to win.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
And so the co-op all of a sudden creates this format where you're going to get to learn how to play Dice Throne. And my hope as a dueler is that after you play the co-op, you're going to realize, oh, I could battle my friends now too. This game isn't so aggressive and so mean-spirited like a lot of combat games that we can't just, hey, let's play some duels. Let's play some team games. So not only do the co-op people get to have a co-op and the duelers get to now play co-op, but now those co-op people might explore the world of fighting and dueling.
Yeah, and it was it was really challenging. Like I thought and it was interesting. Like it seemed like at first I thought, oh, we can't do this when we played. Like we couldn't beat the boss that we got to, but it actually ended up going down to the wire, and we almost did. And so I found myself really wanting to get back there and try again. And it sounds like it's going to have a lot of replayability because there will be ways to make it harder, and there's ways to progress on much further than what we did. So
that's the mark of every best co-op, though, I think, is that it always comes down to the wire. You know, like either in your favor or not. But like if you feel as though, man, we did have a chance, you know, and if I would have done this thing differently or that thing differently, then, you know, it could have gone the other way. Like that's a good co-op in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Definitely. So you were what video games did you work on before you guys started making Dice Throne?
So I moved from Minnesota to Spokane. My wife and I moved from Minnesota, where we grew up, to Spokane to work for a company called Cyan Worlds. They did Myst, Riven.
Oh yeah.
Now I did
Little
not
games.
work.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Yes. I did not work on Myst and Riven. I was there. I started in 2004. And I was hired specifically to help them branch out into new game development. So as a game designer / concept artist, illustrator. So that was my primary job. I worked on Myst 5 End of Ages. I was a 3D artist and illustrator. But then basically everything I worked on never got produced. Like the company kind of imploded at the time. They just couldn't get that next game lined up, which is so common in video games. And then from there, I actually took a detour into just graphic design work, working for a company that makes kids dinnerware. And I did that for 8 years.
It's a bit of a departure there.
It is a very big departure. We wanted to stay in Spokane, and there is no jobs here. It's a small town. There's not a lot of industry.
So kids' dinnerware, like plates with like Dora the Explorer,
literally
stuff like that.
Yeah, they're melamine plates. They're like you go into Target and there's that box sitting on the shelf that has a plate, a bowl, and a cup in it. And it has Dora or Tinkerbell or Frozen or whatever. That was me. I'm the guy making those plates, cups, and bowls.
That's valuable work.
Yes,
I'm going to start. So there's this thing. I don't know if you guys are still doing this or not, but in the Dice Throne community where people would find Dice Throne in Barnes and Noble and they'd like take a selfie with it. That was a thing, right? I'm going to start doing that with those plate sets at Target. I'm going to take a selfie with those and tag you. Okay?
Yes. Well, honestly, because it's seasonal, so I don't think there's anything I have made that is still out in the market. You can find my work, like you
find them at
can't
Goodwill.
find it. Yeah, totally. You wouldn't know it was my work because none of that stuff is ever labeled.
Sure, yeah.
But I did like these lines of Tinkerbell products, and the thing I was most proud of was this line of product I did that wasn't licensed. It was its own line of plates. It was called Momo, and it was its own line of bamboo style dinnerware.
Yeah,
and bamboo composite material. So it's like a melamine mixed with bamboo.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
You can still actually find it on like Amazon or whatever. And it won an award when it was made. And I love to share this part, but I made it on a Saturday at work. We had to come in on Saturday.
Oh, wow.
We had to make a line of product. So I was like, I don't know, I guess I'll make this. And so I just designed this line of product on a Saturday. And then it went on to be this like successful, well liked. I don't know how much it actually sold, but this liked weird thing of games. Anyways, so I digress. So I went to there, and then after that, I ended up getting hired at a company called 7-2 in Spokane that Nate worked at. And he's a programmer. I'm a game artist. And so I worked on apps like Dora and Finding Nemo and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other assorted, mainly kids-related game apps.
Yeah.
So that was my last thing before we got laid off, and then now I'm
Did you enjoy doing that kind of work in the game space, or was it stressful?
Doing licensed work for like Disney, it had its up moments. Like my favorite one is I got to do a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a style guide, because most of that stuff, like Disney will say, here's the art, use this art.
Right. Yeah.
But this specific one didn't have any art. And so they said, well, you guys are going to need to find art or make it. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
So I got to build the art and the style guide for this game. I got to make the backgrounds, and I got to draw my own, versions of the different turtles, and
that's crazy.
That's cool.
So that part was super cool. But generally, when you're doing licensed work like that, you just got to make Disney happy, but it also has to get under budget.
Lots of red tape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, or I want our listeners to hear too. Like, we've talked obviously at length about Dice Throne and stuff, but that's not the only thing you're doing now in tabletop world. So share what you can.
So since Dice Throne, there have been a number of companies that have asked me to do art for other games, and mostly I've been too busy to tackle that kind of stuff. But as anyone who's ever built their own company would know, there's not a lot of income when you first start. Like people, you're really not paying yourself when you're trying to build a company from the ground up. And if you are, you're probably not building a very good company. Right?
Not one that's going to last.
No. And so over the last 6 to 9 months, most of the money we make from Dice Throne goes back into building the company, which might surprise some people out there, but if that's just kind of how it works. And so I started taking on some freelance work, and James Hudson, many don't know this, he was the second person to review Dice Throne for our first Kickstarter. So Ed Bariff, or Gaming with Edo, he was the first person to agree to do a review for Dice Throne Season 1, before it was called Season 1. And so Edo, James, and Man vs. Meeple were the first people to review and play our game. And so since that time, James Hudson and I have kind of built a friendship, and he has often said, hey, I really want to work on a game with you at some point. And so he has shared this all over Facebook and Instagram, but they have a game in development at Druid City called Wonderland's War. And there are a bunch of really cool game designers working on it, and I get to do the art, and it's all still very much in flux. I mean, there's all kinds of changes going on and iterating in standard board game fashion.
Yeah. I who's working on that? I'm trying to remember.
The original cast, I think, was Gilmore, Jonathan Gilmore, Ian Moss.
They did Dinosaur Island and Dead of Winter.
Right. And then there was Tim and Ben Eisner. I'm not totally up on, their status or what they're doing or who's still involved or what's happening. So as the artist, my job is to make pretty junk. So
that's right.
But some
put you in that studio in your backyard.
Yes, just let me sit back here and draw. That's what I want, really.
Some mildly successful game designers are working on that, we'll say.
And then I'm also
being a little facetious.
People don't know this one, but I am working on a project with Roxley Games. But Gavin has not announced anything, or he hasn't done any kind of publicity or promotion for it or anything. So that's for him to share when he feels fit. But that's been a lot of fun. I've been making art. I'm not doing any game design for it. Probably the most exciting thing for me recently was I made a game with my son. We started making it a couple years ago. It's called Dragon's Keep, and it has been picked up by a publisher.
Wow.
And so me and my son will have co-game design credit on his first game.
Dang.
It's called, say the name of it again?
Dragon's Keep.
Okay.
And when he's 8.5 now. He was 6.5 when we started. And I asked him if he wanted to make his own game. And he said, yeah. And I said, all right, you got to come up with a theme. You got to tell me what the game's about. And he thought about it for like 10 seconds. And he said, I want it to be about dragon. I want to be a dragon. And I want to get all the gold.
There you go.
And I was like, that sounds like a perfectly valid board game. Yeah. And so we have been making this game, and I actually have the contract sitting in my email right now to sign with a publisher.
Wow.
And so it was very cool. And I don't think it's not really public yet at this point, but it's the publisher specifically told me, they said, well, once we make changes, if we do, we want to make sure your son approves all the changes.
That's awesome, dude.
And that was very encouraging to me.
Does he need a lawyer? I'll be his lawyer.
Yes.
You set like office hours for him.
Yes.
Like, all right, you need to be working on design during this time.
So
math homework first.
Yes. Oh, they do math homework for sure. But yeah, that's been super fun. And then I also continue to make games just for fun on the side. I have one I'm working on right now that I hope, I don't know if I'll find a publisher or if I'll do my own Kickstarter on the side for it. Whatever I do, I might have like a game linked to a comic book, have a comic book that runs concurrent to the game itself. I don't know. So lots of fun
that's
things.
Something you do as well is, well, we didn't even talk about Pog Throne.
Right,
but,
we did
that's
not.
Another
thing. Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Which is, uses milk caps. Like, I guess you discovered, you're calling it Pog Throne, so I guess I remember you telling me you discovered that you can use the term Pog.
We can. We looked into it, and apparently Pog is now considered a common word. But there is a person out there trying to actually he's trying to petition to gain the copyrights, and he's been declined once, and so he's re-petitioning to try to get it. If he loses this time, then it's for sure lost, and he can never get it again. But
now, is he doing that because of Pog Throne?
No,
or
this would just happen to be a person trying to get the rights to the word Pogs. But yeah, this Pog Throne is kind of funny because it started back in October with April Lynn, and
who's one of our staff and founders.
Yes, she's awesome.
And Mr. Is it Poyer?
Yeah, no one knows. We just go per. Yeah. No, it's Poyer.
Yeah. So the both of them had kind of jokingly made fun of some art I posted because I put art in a circle, and they were like, "Oh, it's Dice Throne Pogs," and I was like, "Sure, sure, yeah. You caught me. It's Dice Throne Pogs." And then from there, I went, my friend Aaron Hine, who's all over our Facebook community, and he's been helping out with Dice Throne a ton since the start. But I said, Aaron, we need to try to make Pogs fun because it's a crappy game. And so we started and we made Pogs, and then Nate got involved after we had started. And then Nate kind of helped really fine tune it into what is now Pog Throne.
And so you throw Pogs at a stack of, or you throw a slammer at a stack of Pogs and try to flip them over.
Yes.
And each of the you have different characters, and they have kind of like different abilities that they can use. So you choose how you want to play. You can try to catch the slammer after you've slammed it on the Pogs, and if you do, you can get like a bonus damage or different things like that.
Yeah, it's
so just to get
every time I tell anyone about it, the first thing they do is roll their eyes at me. And then I say, you need to try it. Afterwards, you're going to tell me that it was more fun than it should be.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that has universally been the truth. Except one dude who walked up and he's all like, Pogs are dead. Let them stay dead.
Cool, bro. You're so edgy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, nobody really wants to hang out with that guy anyway.
Yeah.
So.
I don't.
No. No, but that would definitely be well, I thought it was going to be fun to begin with. But it was definitely my experience that it was more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
And I think it hits that nice little, like April Lynn actually wrote about this on our site. It hits that nice, note where you're doing something that almost like as an adult feels like you probably shouldn't be doing, but I don't know if that makes sense. It sounds bad when I say it, but like you're going to throw this slammer down and who knows where it's going to land. And it could be awkward in your home for that to happen, but it's really satisfying when you do it well. And, I like that it gets people out of their comfort zones a little bit to do something that's a little bit goofy. But once you do it, you're like, oh man, that's so simple yet so satisfying.
Right. I mean, the first time we were playing, right? And I made you restack, and I'm like, now throw it like you mean it. No, actually throw it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You helped me have fun my first game because you were like, man, you
gotta
a stickler, Drew. Like give it Yeah.
Well, the truth is,
because like especially at Gen Con, you're a little bit worried like it's gonna land because people were playing Dice Throne around where we were playing Pog Throne, and I'm like, is this slammer gonna like knock into somebody's dice or like make somebody mad? But it's all part of the experience you learn.
It really is. And the truth is adults don't throw things at other things unless they're mad or they're, in a fit of rage, right? And so you let an adult let go and like throw a poker chip effectively at a stack of cardboard.
Yeah.
It's very freeing.
I can tell you as a parent of 3 small children, we need some outlets to like that are safe. That are safe for that kind of activity.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. So tell us about like do you grow up in the Spokane area? Is that where you're originally from?
No, I did not. So I grew up in the Minneapolis area in Minnesota. Okay. So just in the suburbs around Minneapolis. That's where I was born and raised. I have 2 younger sisters, a younger brother. And so I was the oldest. It's funny when you asked my last name or where it's from. My original last name is Niska. I was adopted by my dad at 10, 11.
Oh, cool.
He's the only dad I've ever known. But when growing up, my full name was Emmanuel Mark Niska, and all the rest of my family was Trembley. And I never really.
That sounds like Scandinavian.
Yeah, Niska is Finnish actually. It's from.
Okay.
It's yes.
Sounds like a hockey player.
Yeah. But yeah, so growing up, I didn't even know that I had a different. I mean, I knew I had a different last name, but I never put 2 and 2 together. That meant it wasn't. I was only half biologically related to my siblings.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I grew up in there, and we, like I said, I moved to Spokane for the purposes of a job with Cyan.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. And was religion a part of your upbringing? There's a lot of Lutheran folks up in Minneapolis.
Yeah,
am I thinking
Minnesota
correctly?
is a pretty heavily Lutheran part of the world. My family was not particularly religious. We went to Catholic church for Easter and Christmas. Or if Grandpa went. If my grandfather went, then we found ourselves at the Catholic church. And
he had that kind of sway.
Yeah. We also...
but he wasn't that into it so that he went.
No. He only went occasionally. And when he went, then we went. But we always...
like, all right, everybody's going to church.
Yes, yeah. So we definitely went for Easter and Christmas. And we also said the Catholic dinner prayer as fast as possible every evening.
Okay.
Oh wait, I think I know. Is that this? Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Yes.
Boom.
There you go. You nailed it.
Nice.
I'm not even Catholic.
Yes. So that was kind of the extent of it. My family went through some trauma. When I was 12, my parents got divorced, and in that time period, I ended up experiencing a pretty intense Lutheran sect that my grandfather was a part of, my mom's dad. And so
different.
Is this the same one that would force you to go?
It's a different one.
To church?
It's a different one.
Different one. Okay.
So this is my mom's
converted, dad. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
And so I experienced during this divorce, my mom kind of reverted back to her family, and she went where she thought she belonged with her family. And so there was a lot. It was a very volatile, horrible divorce. And in that process, I experienced this intensely domineering, not pleasant, firstborn apostolic Lutheran church.
Oh boy.
And I've never heard of, I've always thought, and I don't know if this is true or not, this might be a stereotype that's way off, but you think of people in Minnesota being Lutheran, of just being sort of like this friendly,
right,
kind of very kindly Midwestern sort of religion.
Yes.
But that was not, this was a different sect of
it
that,
was. It was a more extreme. I mean, there was, women couldn't wear makeup. They had to cover their heads.
Oh, wow.
The men couldn't wear ties because those were considered adornments. Kids can't play organized sports because that's, fraternizing with or spending time with, the heathens of the world.
Yeah. Did you play organized sports leading up to this?
Yes, I did.
Did you have to quit?
I did, actually. I played a lot of baseball. That was my primary sport.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so mom's Nope.
I
no more baseball.
did not play baseball that summer. I ended up actually choosing. My dad had legally adopted me the year before they got divorced, and so through the unfriendly divorce, I ended up living with my dad instead of my mom.
Okay.
And so both my younger sisters and brother ended up with mom, and I ended up with dad. And so I then, it was just me and my dad, and eventually, a new family formed. But anyway, so that was a volatile part. So religion was not really a part of our family growing up. It was I'll tell you a short story here, and then we can move on. But when I was 10, I was laying in bed. My dad came in to tuck me in, and I remember telling him, "Dad, he give me a kiss. Well, time to bed." I was like, "Dad, I think I'm going to kill myself."
Oof.
And he got real serious, as any parent should. And he started asking why, and I said, "I just don't see the point. Like, this was before the divorce. There was no there was just, I would call regular family volatility up to this point." Which I have since learned is not regular family volatility, but sure felt normal.
Sure.
And so I told him this, and he kind of walked me through. He gave me what I would think any parent would say is like, "You're loved by your family. You have a lot to live for." And I remember my inside response was, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. I guess I won't do that then." And I don't know that I would have proceeded through done anything at that age, or if I was just spitballing or exploring the world in my head.
Sure. Yeah.
But I remember at 10, and I didn't tell my dad or mom this at the time, but I was like, wow, so I'm going to hell and I need to find God, and I don't know how to do it. So I have the rest of my life to figure this out, and I better figure it out fast. So this is not normal 10-year-old.
At 10, yeah. Like, what?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm thinking about Ninja Turtles at age 10.
No,
and you're over here like contemplating the complexities of the universe and eternity.
It wasn't.
I can understand it. My daughter is in this phase right now where every once, it's not lately, but there was a good stretch where she would wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know if she'd wake up in the middle of the night, but she just wouldn't go to sleep. And she'd come in and tell us that she can't stop thinking about death.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we had to have these conversations about
about
hope and why death is something that we like. Some ways you do want your kids to be afraid of it, because you don't want them to walk close to the edge when you're hiking or of a cliff or something. But at the same time, you also want them to understand that there's hope, and that I don't know. For me as a Christian, there's a hope beyond the grave, and I believe that God is good and is going to take care of her, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, but I proceeded to spend from 10 to 18 reading books and talking to people of different religions, and it's funny enough that through that 8 years, the organization I hated most was Christianity. I was very opposed to Christians. I thought that they were
And what was that rooted in?
It was the people I would meet. I'm sure part of it ended up being my grandfather's church.
Oh yeah, sure.
That definitely didn't feed a very good view of it. But I also remembered feeling like most of the Christians I had met in my teens, they were intensely angry and hated others and hated people. And I remember someone asked me to pray Jesus into my heart at a mall, and so I did it just because. I was like, fine, let's do this.
Just leave me alone. Yeah,
fine.
I did that too, because I was like, somebody said I was going to go to hell if I did, and I was like, well, I should probably give it a whirl. At least,
yeah, sure. What's the worst that could happen?
Pretty bad.
Right. So I remember, I was an angry person through junior high school. But I was inward angry. I was probably the guy that was going to snap and do something horrible kind of person. But you never would have thought that, because I was Minnesota nice. I would just I would be nice to people.
Yeah.
But I remember these guys. I prayed Jesus into my heart, and they gave me a hug, and they walked away. And I remember being just mad. I was angry at them. Remember, and as they walked away, the only thing I could think in my mind was, they have no idea that I hated every minute of that, and that I meant none of it. And they're doing nothing to follow up. They're doing nothing to help me.
Yeah.
And I remember at that moment or around there, I was like, Christianity is the worst of all of the religions, and I want nothing to do with it. It was a fascinating time to reflect on.
Yeah. But you were still searching for like meaning and
right. What's interesting is life. In high school, there were two moments. One was I was like, okay, so what are true things, right? I was like trying to figure out what is truth. And I remember coming to my own conviction that the Bible was from God and that I had to use the Bible to find God, even though Christians were the worst. And
there's a lot of truth to that.
And then I remember...
That's going to be the title of this episode of the podcast, Christians are the worst.
The Bible is true, Christians are the worst.
Yes. And I remember thinking that, and I'm like, well, okay, so that's the one thing I have to study and figure out, because that must have the answers, right? If it's actually from God, it must have the answers.
Do you think that did that come from your upbringing? Just this
I honestly don't remember. Like, I don't feel like, I think when I talked to my mom about it, I think she tried. I think she tried her best when she was younger, or when I was younger, to try to influence this. I mean, she named me Emmanuel. And
right.
Specifically, God is with us. If God is with you, who can be against you? And so, in church, when people would sing, O come, Emmanuel, I would always get really weirded out by
it. I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here, guys. You can stop singing.
And so, but I remember thinking that, and then I remember wondering, how could anyone know they should ever get married? Right? Watching the volatile divorce, I was like, well, I better put some fail-safes in place, right? So in high school, I remember thinking to myself, all right, there's 3 things. This is how I'm going to know I should marry someone. I was like, for 1, she's going to love God more than me. 2, she's agreed to not have sex before marriage. And 3, I'm not going to kiss her at all until our wedding day. And if she's not cool with that, then we're not going to get married.
Oh.
Yeah. This is so interesting because you're not really a Christian at this point.
No.
But you had really bought into some deeply evangelical views of dating and stuff.
Right. Some things that I didn't even understand. When I finally did become a Christian, I remembered thinking to myself, oh, that's cool. So that means any woman I marry should love God more than me. We should agree to have a pure relationship. And the third one is a little awkward. And I remember people challenging me. They'd be like, well, you can't expect your future, wife to not do that. And I says, well, yeah, I can. Yeah. And look, I can. If she won't agree to that one, then that obviously isn't the person I should marry. And it was pretty funny. Once I started dating my now wife, I remember it was our second date, and I walked her to her door, and she went inside. And then I called her a little while later, and I said, okay, so I don't know if that was weird, but I just want you to know that I'm not going to kiss you.
Oh my gosh.
And she was like, oh, good.
I could go one of 2 ways.
And she was like, oh, good. Okay. Oh, phew. And I said, oh, I'm glad you think that. And I said, obviously, I don't know if we're going to get married. We've been on 2 dates. And I said that me telling you this has nothing to do with my belief that we will or won't get married. But any person I date, I am not going to kiss them until the day of our wedding. And I just want you to understand that that's a conviction that I have, and that is what I will be doing. And she was like, sounds great. So, we held up.
And that's when you knew.
Yeah. And that's actually, after that moment, I was like, I could marry this woman. And so we dated, and we got married, and we held to all those things. So,
dude, that's wild.
Was she from a Christian background?
Her dad tried. They read the Bible a little bit, but mostly no. They didn't go to church either.
Okay.
So yeah, I got married. I just turned 21. So I met her the first time when I was 19, turning 20, and then we got married about a year and a half later.
That's cool.
Wow.
And but then you did, spoiler, I guess, but you became a Christian at some point.
I did.
When did you decide when did you kind of take on that identity? You figure out, I guess you're reading the Bible during this time and stuff because you believed that the Bible was.
Yeah, I didn't believe the Bible was understandable. And I think that had a lot to do with Christian and Lutheran upbringing. And so I think that's...
So that's a common thing in Lutheran circles is that like we can't fully know what the Bible's about or something, or what?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as prevalent in Lutheran. I think it's very prevalent in the Catholic Church, but I remember feeling
right. So in the Catholic Church, it's kind of like you need there's some Catholics who believe like you need the Pope to explain this to you. You need the Church to lay out what this is
and
about.
I don't know how prevalent that still is, or maybe it still is, but it was definitely when I was a kid that it was kind of that mindset of, you don't read the Bible, the priest or the Pope or the your whatever.
Sure.
They are the ones who read it and understand it. Actually, it was interesting. To give you a 10-penny tour, when I graduated high school, and my dad had said, so if you're going to go to college, then you can live in the home. But if you can't, if you're not going to college, then you should move out. You need to move on with your life. So I chose not to go to college, and I moved out. And the month after I moved out, I met a handful of people from this church, and they asked me to if I was interested in studying the Bible. And so I said no. And I proceeded to say no regularly, and then I was too busy.
Yeah.
And then a girl I was dating at the time, she came along one day and she's like, hey, I'm going to this church thing, and I don't want to go by myself. Will you go with me? And I said, is it at the Hyatt downtown? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, sure, fine, I'll go. So I went to this thing, and
the girls.
Yes,
involved,
yeah. Honestly, that was a big incentive.
Flirt to convert, baby.
And so I went to this thing, and I hated it. I disliked the service. I didn't like the preaching. I didn't like anything about it. And I just was waiting to leave and never go back again. And this random dude walked up to me, and he was all like, hey, do you read the Bible? And I was like, I debate the Bible. And he's like, do you want to get together? And he's like, do you want to get together and talk about the Bible? And I was like, sure. And so I remember I was driving to meet this guy at a Denny's.
Yeah.
And
were you dreading it, or were you excited?
I was scared, honestly. I was really scared. I thought I was going to some cult. I thought, I'm going to show up, and they're going to ask me to drink some Kool-Aid or something, and they're going to try to tell me,
which is possible.
They're going to try to tell me what's wrong and why I am horrible, or and I prayed. So I'm driving to this Denny's, and I had two prayers. The first was the guy who invited me to this thing. His name was Tony, and I was like, I don't like Tony. I think he's a nerd, and I said, I hope that Tony brings someone cool with him, and that Tony doesn't talk the entire time.
Manny, I gotta interrupt you. I'm sorry, because I need to verbally appreciate your honesty, and I need everyone else to zero in on this, because I feel like maybe this will be weird to say, but when somebody's had a couple drinks, right? And it's then the honesty comes out, and they just talk like they would normally talk. And I'm assuming it's a little early for you to already be drinking. I just think this is who you are. And that is very refreshing. And I think people can learn a lot from that, to just have that kind of honesty, but also do it in a way that you're not a dick. You can be honest without being mean.
Right.
Anyway, I needed to process that out loud, and now we can continue with the story about Tony.
So anyway, Tony, this is my first prayer, is that someone cool shows and Tony doesn't talk. And then my second one is, okay, if they sit down and they try to tell me what to do with my life, or try to tell me what I'm doing wrong, then I'm just going to get up and leave. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to leave. So I got there early. I'm sitting at Denny's. Two people show up, which I learned later is fairly common when people study the Bible with other people. That's not an uncommon thing to have partners and, people teaming up on others.
It's interesting that you wanted that. You wanted somebody else to be there, because I think some people might interpret that as like a bait and switch. You invited me to talk about the Bible, and then you brought in your heavy hitter to close the deal or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, two guys show up, Tony and Dan. Dan ended up being in my wedding. We're very good friends.
Oh, cool.
So they sit down. Tony says hello, And then Dan starts talking, and he's like, listen, small talk, hanging out. And then he's like, okay, so we're here. He's like, the first thing I just want to say is I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life. I'm not here to force you to believe something or try to force some kind of religion on you. He said that's not the point. The point is years ago, I studied the Bible and started learning things about myself. And I want to share these with you. And if they're applicable and if they work for you and there's something you want to change, then by all means, then we can hang out and study the Bible and we can learn together. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
So we proceeded to hang out. We talked and shared Bible scriptures. And Tony didn't say a word. And then he said, at the very end, he said goodbye. And so Tony said hello and goodbye in a 2-hour conversation.
Okay.
And so it was soon thereafter that.
So Tony's the opener and Dan's the closer, apparently.
Well, I became friends with Tony as well. Tony was, both guys were 10 years older than I was, which was interesting for me because I think at that time in my life, I wouldn't have listened to people my own age. I was, people my age were dumb, and I was dumb. Yeah. I mean, the hard truth is that I was an idiot as well, but sure. I wouldn't have heard another 20-year-old. So the whole campus ministries or whatever that are all pumped and excited and, high energy.
Yeah.
I would have hated those people with a real passion. And so instead I ended up spending a lot of time with these married men who were about 8 to 10 years older than I was. And so that was kind of the church group that I became a part of and the ministry that I became a part of. And so, that's kind of and I remember.
I appreciate.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I remember a revelation I had after this point, because I was convinced before this that I was just waiting to go to hell. Like there was I was hoping that maybe someday I'd figure it out and I could, find God. But after all this happened, I remember I was sitting in a bathroom at the deli that I worked at. And I was like, oh no, now I know the truth. Oh man, I can't ditch this. Like now if I leave this, if I run away from it, I'm running away from something that I believe is actually true. And that was it was a very I'm 19 years old and I'm like, well, if I live to be standard age, I got to hold on to this conviction for 50 to 68, 70 years. Man, can I do it? Can I actually remain faithful? Can I be a real disciple of Jesus for 50, 60, 70 years?
Yeah, there's two things that kind of stuck out to me in your story that I think are interesting and valuable. One is these guys, Tony and Dan, who talk to you. Like, I think there's people struggle to it's almost offensive to a lot of people to say, hey, let's get together and talk about the Bible. But it's hard to have those conversations these days, it feels like. But I appreciate them just being like, hey, that's what I want to hang out and talk to you about. Like, there's no pretense. There's no bait and switch. It's not like, hey, come over to this, Xbox game night.
Come to this game night.
And then all of a sudden they're telling you you need to trust Jesus or something or else. But no, just hey, would you like, and then it's on you. Would you like to come talk about the Bible with me? I think just that honesty is something that I think could probably go a long way with a lot of people. The other thing that I appreciate about your story is that you were thinking about things that I at a young age, and it sounds like you continue to dwell deeply on these things that a lot of people just don't ever slow down and think about. It seems like you're a very big ideas and important concepts, and the idea of living your life according to what's true seems to be really important to you, which I think even a lot of Christians don't slow down and think about this kind of thing.
And it's a scary universe we live in, kind of. I mean, the idea of saying these things, some people are offended by the notion of this, and I have studied the Bible with people and hung out with people and shared the Bible with people that chose not to want to embrace God or have a relationship. And I'm still friends with these people, and I feel like it's important to me. Yeah, and that honestly,
you work with them and hang out with them.
These are people I know, and I still consider friends.
Sure.
And when I go back to Minnesota and I see them, I give them hugs, and they're great. They're great people, And I it's not my job to force feed someone. It's not my job to punch them in the stomach and drop them to the ground, spiritually speaking.
Right.
And I think it's an important aspect to me, it's an important aspect of my Christianity, that it's about more than just a blunt force, brutal Christianity.
Yep. I remember, you talked about earlier about, the campus crusade, rah guys that are like going out and sharing the gospel on campus and stuff. I was kind of one of those guys in college, and I went to seminary too. I was kind of one of those. When I was in seminary, I went to one of the local like state universities in our area and would like go share the gospel with people. And I remember one time sharing the gospel with this college student, and I'd kind of learned from someone who like, he was good at like, I don't know, this sounds awful, but I'm just gonna call it what it is, like kind of scaring people a little bit. And I didn't like that approach, but I was still influenced by it, and it wasn't this woman I was sharing with was not into it. Like, she was not, I think the whole thing made her uncomfortable, but she was like willing to talk to me just because she's trying to be polite. And she stopped me in the middle of my talk with her, and she was like, you're kind of a jerk.
Good for her.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you're totally right. I went home and like I'm not kidding. Like, I'm kind of an emotional person. Like, I don't hide my emotions very often. And I don't feel bad about like expressing them. So I went home and wept. Like, I cried, and I was like, I am a jerk. Like, and it totally changed the way from like that moment, totally changed the way I relate to people and the way I talk about Jesus and the Bible and stuff. People, I mean, like, and of course I've screwed up a million times since then with the way that I try to minister to people, try to share. But yeah, I always think back fondly on that experience, because I'm like, thank the Lord for this young atheist woman at the University of Louisville who was willing to speak truth to me and help me like chill out and be, try to talk to people like they're human beings. It's incredibly important. Your stories brought me back to that moment. But
cool.
So now you and your wife are Christians and trying to raise your family, Christian home kind of thing. Where are you at now? Like, what's going on with your life? With regard to all that stuff.
It's a serious business, raising children. And I think it was interesting. We had some friends over for dinner the other night, and we were talking about this idea that when you raise children, like, of course they go to church with us. There's kids classes and all that kind of stuff, and we pray with our family. I do my very best. But one of the things I remembered learning when I was young was their parents are infallible up to a certain point, and then they become hypocrites to their children. And I am already a hypocrite to my child and both my boys.
Well, that's refreshing, because I feel
like it is. I think it's a reasonable thing to realize about yourself, that when you're telling your child that they shouldn't have a can of Coca-Cola while I'm drinking a 32-ounce Coke at McDonald's, right? Yeah, that's a microcosm of the hypocrisy that I live. But I try really hard with my boys to express that, to let them know, listen, guys, like, I chew my nails. My son chews his nails. I spent a lot of time telling him he shouldn't chew his nails. Meanwhile, I'm over here gnawing on my fingers like they're cookies. Yeah. And so instead, what I try to do with him is I'm like, listen, I also chew my nails, Jasper. Let's work on it together. Let's do this together. You and I can be friends, and we can, friends in the battle to like not chew our nails. And, when it comes to loving other people, I'm an introvert by nature, and I really don't want to hang out with people and love people. Deep in my core, I want to be alone and selfish. But I need to be that example to my boys, and I'm going to fail, and I make sure to let them know when I fail. And I feel like that's one of the only things I can do, is continue to live out an example of a person who fails all the time. But I keep trying. And my intention is, my heart is to love people. My heart is to love my children. My heart is to provide a safe place for my boys to be boys without the whole current modern boys will be boys jargon of, that gives them the freedom to be jerks, because it doesn't.
Yeah.
But they're adventurous. My kids are brave. They leap off things. They climb. They run. They wrestle. But he also stood up for a girl who was being bullied in class, and it was a high moment. Yeah, yep. It was a high moment for me. And will my children choose to be disciples of Jesus in the future? I don't know. Do I hope they will? Sure, but I can't force them to be. I can do my best, and in the end, they will make their own life choices. And when they do, I will continue to love them regardless of their life choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great, man.
Amen.
Cool. Well, it's great talking to you, man. This is really, I love your story. It was so fun.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that stuff.
Encouraging.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Glad to.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And so people can be looking forward to the last remaining parts of season 2 are coming out pretty soon. What were the dates you said?
I believe season 2, box 3, which is the Cursed Pirate and Artificer. I think it comes out next week in retail.
Okay.
Cool.
So it would be
it'd be the end of March, I believe. And then I believe the Seraph and Vampire Lord box come out in May sometime. I think it's towards the end.
Okay. Great. Cool. And then do you guys have a date in mind for the Kickstarter to launch?
We have been hoping. Our plan is May sometime, but we have yet to make a formal date for that.
Yeah.
So
don't quote him on that.
Yeah, when I say that, that's just our internally. We're hoping that will be around the time we launch it. But we're totally okay with the fact that if we have to push it to later, then we have to push it to later. It'd be better to make that co-op really solid and awesome than force it out into the world.
Yeah, definitely. And then Wonderland War, do you have a date?
I don't know anything about that in terms of release. That's
he's just head down drawing crap.
Yeah.
You do the art.
That's all James. He gets to decide that.
He's on a need to know basis.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We'll ask him. We'll bug him about that. And then we didn't talk about this much. I meant to talk to you about it more, but you do some comics as well.
I do.
Are you still writing stories and drawing and that?
I need to. It's been a few years now since I've made my own books, and you bring that up. It's funny because I was just talking with my wife about how it's a part of who I am, and it's something I need to do, and it pays garbage. And so it soaks up a ridiculous amount of time. Work. Yes, it totally is. It takes up too much time, and pay is terrible, and it's a dying industry of comic books.
Sounds like LTN. Yeah, go on.
Yes, and but inside me, I need to express myself through comic books, and so when I'm not, my wife's like, you're kind of a depressed person when you're not making comic books and making art. And she's like, I am also a heavily emotional person, motivated by my feelings and mood, and so I do better personally when I'm expressing myself artistically and narrative.
Creators have to create, man.
They do.
My wife, that happens to her sometimes too, where if she's getting into that kind of funk or just really down, I'm like, what have you made? Like have you been making anything? Painting or any stuff? And it's like it's a world of difference.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're not creating when you need to be. And part of it's like, I got lots to do for work. And it's hard to rationally allow myself to make things for fun when there's so much business to do.
Sure.
But I am terrible at business. And when I'm even worse at business when I'm not creating properly.
Yeah. Oh, life. Let us know when you figure it out.
Yes.
So if people want to check out the books that you have written, where would they go?
Fishtankbooks.com is my store. It's my personal website.
Cool.
And so I still have all my previous books I've made. They're up there. People can find them.
Yeah. And they're great. Like you gave us one when we were at Dice Throne Con, and I've read it to my daughter and she loves it. So definitely would encourage people to go check out Victoria Jr. Those books, some of those short stories and things are great. So go check them out. I love that you made something that's got like a really a great story about good relationships between kids and their parents. I think we don't see a ton of like there's as a parent, I recognize that those kinds of stories aren't like you have to kind of search them out. Really, honestly, it feels that way sometimes. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to check that one out. But thanks so much for coming on the show, Manny. This was a lot of fun.
I'm happy to do it.
Anything else you would want to plug before we
no, my boy is currently standing over my shoulder whispering at me.
Is there? Oh, he wants us to plug his game.
Oh yeah, Dragons
Keep. Yeah, yep. Cool. We'll be looking for that too. Well, great. This is a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Manny.
Thank you guys.
And I forgot. I was supposed to say all the things. Go to lovethynerd.com and check out our great articles. We have a whole podcast network. There's Free Play, which covers all areas of nerddom and is just really fun to listen to. They'll keep you informed. Also, they do a good job of keeping you informed of what's going on with Love Thy Nerd. We've got some trips coming up to Phoenix Fan Fusion and Gen Con. So if you're interested in going on a trip with Love Thy Nerd, going on a trip with us, go check those out or ask us online. We have a Facebook community that's great. Just search for Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook and click join. But then also search for Love Thy Nerd and click like on Facebook. That would help us a lot. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Love Thy Nerd. We're on YouTube as well. I think that's kind of all the things. We also have a comic podcast called The Pull List that's fantastic too. So if you're a comic nerd, you'll definitely want to listen to that one. They've got some cool interviews lined up. They just did one not too long ago with one of the guys from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The guy, Eastman.
Yeah. Yep. So go listen to that. And that's it for us here on Human's Game. See you next week.
Later.